Okay, here we are looking at Betta deferens, also known as a Siamese fighting fish. These fish in captivity, when facing each other, a potential competitor in this case, as you see right here, take a fighting stance. They flare their gills, they make themselves look as big as possible, they'll turn sideways and shake to scare off the opponent. It's very territorial. It has to do with mating. In the wild, they're fine. They find their space and they're fine. But in captivity, they fight each other, especially if they're in the same tank, obviously. So right now, they're being aggressive towards each other. Another form of exhibiting the aggression, this is actually kind of interesting, is the aggression will facilitate their desire to mate. Now, when Betta deferens is interested in mating, if it sees a female, for example, it will create what's called a bubble nest. It'll blow little air bubbles with its mouth, and those bubbles will sit at the top of the water. It's almost like a competitive thing. This guy's got a bigger nest than this guy, for example. I don't know if it's some sort of competitive, who's bigger, who's tougher, but it is consistent. If these two fish were put in the same tank, they would fight to the death. One would die, the other would be mangled. If I were to separate them so that they could not see each other, you'd have less of this activity. This is not entirely unhealthy activity because they can get away from each other. It does not cause stress. It actually is a little bit invigorating. It's like exercise for them. Again, that's opinion, but I've raised and mated bettas. They're beautiful fish. They're best alone. They cannot handle being in a tank with other freshwater tropical fish, like say the worst would be tiger barbs. Because of their big fins, they're targets to nippers. Nip at the edge of the tail, nip at the fins. And their fins, while quite attractive and beautiful, I like that look, are very conducive to stagnant water. It helps them propel through stagnant water. But if you put them in a tank with, see, this guy's really aggravated. He wants to fight. He may not win, but he wants to fight. And he's showing it now. Now, what you want to see is how will he act when the purple guy decides, okay, let's go at it. So back to the concept of these fish. They thrive in, here we go. All right, the red guy is more aggressive, even though the purple guy has the better nest. He's the better provider, as stereotypes go. Talk about the nest another time. But they thrive in stagnant water because their fins are so big. Imagine a current, like a river, or even a fish tank. A current would really throw them off because their fins are like sails, and they would get pushed around, and they have incredible muscles to carry those tails around. But even with those muscles, a current would be bad. You can find them in shallow, stagnant water in the Far East, hence the name Siamese fighting fish, indigenous in Siam, or what used to be called Siam. I think that's Vietnam, I'm not sure, but at least part of it's in Vietnam. They have I'm not sure what it's called, I forget, let's call it a labyrinth. They have an ability to breathe air, not lungs. So if you put them in incredibly shallow water, they would be able to breathe air by going to the surface and just gulping it and somehow processing it as if it were through water. The urban legend is you could put a Siamese fighting fish on a wet washcloth and it would live for a day. And that's actually been accidentally tested by me as one got out. and he was in a puddle of water, and I found him, I don't know, 2-3 hours later, and the guy was still alive. As long as he was wet and damp, he was okay. The other thing is they're very low maintenance fish for beginners. They don't have a lot of pollution. Their elimination isn't large. For example, a goldfish really raises ammonia, and you can put them in stagnant water, but you have to change that water frequently. Siamese fighting fish can live in dirty water. I mean, they live in rice paddies, rice paddy pools, which are stagnant, so there's not a lot of circulation. There's a lot of pollution. The bubble nest, which we'll talk about later, but the bubble nest is in preparation for mating. The bubble nest would be used to store eggs that a female releases after mating, and the male would supervise and guard the nest as the eggs stayed in the bubble nest, out of the water, and matured enough to become fish and fall out. And there's a lot more to that. For example, in captivity, once the mating is done, which is actually an interesting ritual, the female gets really beat up, and you have to be careful and protect her. After the mating ritual is done, the male gently picks up all the eggs and spits them into the bubble nest, and then he protects them. Once they become fish and are born, you have to get him out of the tank, because then he'll eat them. In the wild, this isn't a problem, but in captivity, it is. Little fish can get away in the wild. But that's how it works. You need stagnant water for the bubble nest. You need stagnant water to make their activity more pleasant. And the occasional antagonism from a neighbor is not a bad thing. Very active right now, the red guy is, I think in part because I'm talking and watching him. If I turn the light out and put the lids back on, they'll probably calm down a little bit. But one way to get a beta to do this without having two fish is to have a mirror, or in this case, I'll use a picture of a beta and put it up to this side and see if he sees it. He may not see it. If he starts shaking side to side, he's taking an aggressive posture. Right now, I think he's thinking about it with his little fish brain. If I move it, see what he does. Okay, so he's not aggressive. His top fin is down. All right, he doesn't see it as real. But he definitely sees the other guy as real. The female beta is not as pretty, for lack of a better word, as the male. In fact, most species on Earth, the male has the more attractive plumage or hair. Lions have the mane, peacocks have feathers. The male competes for the female because in the wild it's Darwinistic. I think the human species is the only one that makes the woman put makeup on. The men wear all the makeup in the animal world, other than people. The female is a bland-looking version of this fish with small fins. And she can survive in a tank with other fish because she doesn't have to worry about being basically a sailboat pushed around by the wind. But when she sees a male and she's ready to mate, an astounding change happens. She will go from a bland gray to purple with perfectly vertical stripes on her body. And she'll swell with eggs, and she'll become quite fascinating to watch. The change happens quickly. She's also quite defenseless at that point because she's so swollen with eggs. And then in a controlled environment, you would mate them. Introduction of the female into the male's tank is dangerous. Introduction of the male into the female's tank is worse. So you want to be careful. I've done this several times. I think I might mate them. Not these two. I might get a female, put the female in between them. When the female's ready for mating, I'll pick a male and we'll do it. So, this is Gabby's beta, the purple one, and this is Cooper's, whose favorite color is red. And there are dogs behind me that want my attention. And this, some dolphin lover. And there's a close-up of Big Red, a little blurry. And there's close-up. So you can see they're near each other now. Red's not in the mood to fight. And that's it.